Ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed my great pleasure for the next instalment on the Quantum Leap Business Show, going around the world for the third time in a year and a half now that we've had since COVID has struck the world. It's my pleasure today to welcome Paul Bolte. Well, hello, Paul.
Hey, John. How are you? Good to hear from you.
Well,
we've got similar accents here, John. Is that what I'm hearing?
I know, and you're in America and I'm in the UK, so the whole world is a bit of a small place.
Hey, go figure.
That's it. Paul, we've known each other for many years. We've worked together and been in competing environments, but we haven't really caught up since COVID. What's your new venture, TrustBridge Global, all about?
Okay, well, thanks for asking, John. Yeah, about 3 years ago, I made the shift out of the digital credit world and moved into a different digital credit world in the non-profit space, but it's a little different from what you are currently doing. Essentially, we're a foundation based in Switzerland, and we facilitate global giving. So we're moving, donors' money from country to country and providing a tax benefit as it leaves. So if you're in the United Kingdom and you wanted to get gift aid, you could give to a charity in Africa. If you're in the United States and you wanted to give to Asia, you could get a tax benefit or a tax deduction going through TrustBridge. So that, in a nutshell, that's the simplest way to explain it, allowing people to be able to give globally and get a tax benefit for doing it.
And so what's the difference between that and the gift aiding and so forth and tax deductibility that happens locally, Paul, within a nation?
Yeah, like normally you can do that locally, no problems, but there is a lot of compliance when you start moving outside of your country. And you just need to know all of the rules and all the laws to do that. And if you don't, you'll get yourself into hot water very quickly. And so we do that, we specialize in that, and we just make it as a service for everyone, kind of like a centralized organization that does all that for people. Okay.
And what got you into that space, having left the digital trade credit space? What was the motivator behind that, which must have been a fairly significant move at the time?
It was. So back in 2018, it's a long story. I don't know how much you want to go into that story, but I came out of the industry that you're in, and I actually started consulting for about 3 or 4 months. Made good money consulting, and a friend of mine said to me, "Hey, here's a role, you should look at this," and it was with TrustBridge. So I applied. There was 645 candidates, and somehow I came out on top. And I've enjoyed it. It's been great. It allows me to basically take this last season of my life, and instead of focusing purely on what's in it for me, I can focus on what's in it for others and make a difference. That's the motivation.
Yeah. What do you think, Paul, by the by, without embarrassing you in any way, what do you think was the one thing that stood you out above the 600 odd crowd?
I don't know, you'll have to ask the guy that employed me, but look, I think when I looked at the job description, they were looking for an entrepreneurial person that could sell, that had connections all over the world, that was not an American, that understood technology and understood digital credits. So it was pretty easy in the end, I think.
So you're fitting in the right person at the right time.
That's right. Yeah.
Paul, you've always been Christian faith, and you are also a member of the Christian Economic Forum. What's that all about?
So the Christian Economic Forum is just a group of Christians that are in business that want to get together and talk about things that you might not otherwise be able to talk about. And so we meet once a year. We met in Colorado this year. Next year, I think, again, is in Colorado because of COVID. But it's just an opportunity to get around other business people that are doing the same sort of work, that have a similar level of faith. Yeah.
So you talked about COVID there, and I know before we came on air that the American dealing with COVID is a lot different than what it has in Australia, for instance. I think Melbourne's the most lockdown city on earth, the amount of days. Here in the UK, we're back out of COVID now, and even though we've got, 30, 50, 100,000 cases a day, hospitalizations have been pretty steady. There's not bodies in the street, but what the American response was quite different. Can you just share with people, particularly from a business perspective, what America did?
Yeah, look, I think when it first hit, we all went into lockdown, and we were in lockdown for 3 weeks, and it became very apparent very quickly that the economy would just come to a grinding halt if we didn't do something about it. And so there were ways to come out of that lockdown where you could still go to work. There was mask mandates and all those types of things, and most people worked from home where they could. I'm still working from home. I've just chosen to do that. It's a better place to work. But yeah, I have a lot of my friends here in the United States ask me what on earth is going on in Australia, and the way that they've handled it down there. And I think, look, they approached it similar to New Zealand. They wanted to get a zero COVID cases. And once it got out of hand, you just can't get the genie back in the bottle. I'm just not sure they'll ever get it back in the bottle now.
Yeah, I liken it to the little Dutch boy with his finger in the dike. And, you know, as soon as you take your finger out, the water starts coming back in again. But
well, and not only that, when you take your finger out, the hole gets bigger.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
therefore you can't just put the same finger back in the same hole. It's all over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Paul, you know, you're on the business scene globally, dealing with COVID. I know you would like to bring some different to the conversation, but have you seen anything that stood out in any way, shape, or form, or repeating what people did to combat COVID in the United States that perhaps we haven't seen over here?
Yeah, look, I'm sure you've all done the same as we've done. Like, we moved online very, very quickly. So we were pretty much doing that as an organization anyway, because I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia. Our national office in the US is based in Tampa, Florida. We're a Swiss foundation. We've got staff in Malaysia, the Philippines, India, and Romania. So we were having to deal electronically anyway. So it didn't really make a huge difference to us as an organization. But I did see just how it affected, you know, like the basics of, you know, the supermarkets had to stay open, but then you get the hairdressers, they all had to shut down. The dentists, they all had to shut down. And so it really affected a lot of industry early on here. And, you know, I know it's opened back up again. I've recently been to the dentist and everything's fine. You know, still getting my hair cut. Probably need a haircut now, but yeah. You could do with a haircut there, John.
We don't go to the same barber yet, I can see. It's all a worry.
You know, I wish there was a silver bullet or a magic bullet for how people have dealt with COVID. But I think it's, you know, as leaders of businesses, flexibility would be a word that I would give people. And I even think now as we come back, the world has changed. And I doubt that we're all going to come back to an office for 5 days a week. I think things are going to be a little bit more flexible, and you're going to have people working from home, people working from offices, and it won't be exactly the same as it was.
Yep. And that's probably good for people like yourself. I know you introduced me to Zoom. I didn't even know what it was until we had an International Reciprocal Trade Association meeting back in, must have been 2016 or thereabouts. And you showed me this new tool. I'd always used Skype, but I'd never seen Zoom before. But you're very much into tech though, aren't you?
Look, I like using technology when it helps. And so if I see technology that makes a difference, and it can benefit what I'm doing in business, then I'm all over it. And I'll be an advocate for whatever it is if it's good. And I was an advocate for Zoom, still using it. So, you know, I know there's competitors that have come on the marketplace. Microsoft Teams has done well, but they'd be the two biggest that have. And I think it was the fact that you could actually schedule an appointment, put it in someone's calendar, hit a link, and you could jump out of one meeting into the next. That's what made the difference between that and Skype. Gone are the days of, you know, dialing up a phone call and then, hey, I've got to get off this line, I'm on another one. You could just have different meetings booked. So it's been very helpful, very helpful. Yep.
So Paul, I've seen you talk about leadership and discipline, which are very important now in your ethos. Can you share some insights there?
Well, if you get me started on leadership, I'm probably going to go down a rabbit hole here. So you just tell me when you want to pull out of the rabbit hole. But one of the things that I've always said to people about leadership, and this is, you know, you can quote me on this one, leadership is not about power and control. It's about serving and sacrifice. And I would argue that the best leaders are the people that are actually serving their teams and asking the questions, how can I help? What difference can I help? What's the challenge in your role? I've got access to the money. I've got access to other people. How can I help you? And if I can pull triggers that can make a difference for you and help you in your role, you're going to probably look at me as a leader, as someone that A, that has listened to you, and B, has actually done something to affect a change that's positive for you. And so leadership, in my opinion, you see too many people want to get into leadership because they think it's, I'm going to be the boss, I'm going to be in control, I'm going to have power. And the reality is it's actually the opposite. And you end up spending your entire time serving everybody that is theoretically answers to you. That's the way I look at it. And it's worked for me over my entire career. So I've been in leadership since I was 22 years old. And I've operated this principle of servant leadership the entire time. And it's worked every time for me, never missed.
Yep. Some nice words there. Paul, burnout and mental health are pretty hot topics at the moment. How do you stop yourself or your team suffering from this? And do you see any signs that crop up that people could take early warning from?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. I think when we all started working from home, suddenly there was no line between work and home. And so normally you would go to the office, you would stop working, you would come home and you were at home. And I know for me personally, I started working different hours. I started starting a lot earlier. But when I finished, I would cut it off. And so a couple of things that I've done that have helped me through this whole process. One is I took all the notifications off my phone for emails. I don't have one of those little red buttons that tells me the number of how many emails I've got. They'll just have to wait, because the amount of stress that it puts on someone thinking they have to have their inbox empty. And when you're running an international business, they're coming in all hours of the day. So you just can't be everything to everyone. So you have to set some boundaries, I think. And if you don't set those boundaries, you're going to find yourself in a big amount of trouble as you try and deal with just a regular work day and get stuff done. I use a calendar, I use a task management system. And so it enables me to be able to block out times to get stuff done and time to actually communicate with people. This meeting, as an example, was in my calendar. So there's nothing else scheduled for this time. So you've got my undivided attention. But yeah, I think that mental burnout, I saw it here in the United States through COVID. There was a lot of issues with people having to face, just being at home, being around people more often than they were around, even in their relationships. I know for me, when I came home, my wife has basically said, I don't want you to go back. But I'm not sure that's the same for everyone. And so we need that balance.
Yeah, particularly with those that have got young children as well, because you've got other distractions and that must be tough.
It is. I mean, I've got 2 dogs and I'm surprised the dog is not barking right now and interrupting us. So,
Paul, you've been a leader of people and employed a lot of people in multiple countries. How do you maintain motivation with staff, for those out there that do have staff?
Yeah, look, you're right. I've had staff for, I don't know how many years, a number of years. And, again, I would go through that same sort of servant leadership approach. And that is when you are serving your team and providing them and asking how you can help them, that's one that helps them and motivates them. 2, encouraging them through either words, via whether that's digitally, through a text, an email, or verbally. Always encourage people. I know for me personally, I appreciate being encouraged. And so I always try and encourage others. It's not easy to hold people accountable and keep that motivation up. So if you're going to have that accountability, put some structures in place. In fact, we're actually running it's a book called Traction. I don't know whether you've ever heard of it. It's the Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS it's called. And it allows us to be able to get on one page our entire business plan. And then we have a weekly meeting. And in that weekly meeting, there's a whole series of steps. I won't go into it now, but we hold each other accountable, and we've got a rhythm of doing that now. And so it's not out of step to say, hey, why didn't you do that? You said you were going to do that. Because we actually have to front up every week and say, well, this is what I said I would do, and this is what I actually did. Yep. And so you get into that rhythm of making sure you actually do what you say you're going to do.
And
as a team member, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people struggle with, I guess, doing the right thing, figuring out what's important and what's urgent, and having some structure to their lives. So that sounds like it's a good solution.
Oh, it's a great system. We operate a system called rocks, and rocks are the big things that you have to get done. So in a quarter, each staff member probably has 2, no more than 3 very large rocks that they have to achieve. And some of those rocks, what we'll call corporate rocks, where it's more than just them involved. Others, it's just personal. But it allows us that focus to say, right, I'm going to get this done this quarter. And when it's done, it's actually going to help move the organization forward. Makes a big difference.
And I know you're a big part of, celebrating success. And how do you do that online? We used to have a bell in my old office where you had people all together, and, you could feed off the energy, but how do you do that remotely?
Yeah, look, it's a challenge, and we run our meetings remotely, but we will celebrate online, and we'll still cheer and clap and do all those sorts of things when people have done a great job. Even things like sending out for a takeout, so that every staff member is sitting in their Zoom room and they're actually getting takeout lunch that's been delivered. And so it's just little things like that where you can have those celebrations. You just got to think differently of how to do it. I do travel. So once a quarter, I travel to Florida and we celebrate. We go out and we'll do some fun stuff together and make sure that we do celebrate the successes. I think it's another big thing is that oftentimes when you're in an organization that's driven based on goals, at the end of the time period, whether that's monthly, quarterly, or yearly, we all go, oh, we've hit the goal. And then we're so busy moving on to the next one that we don't take the time to actually reward ourselves and celebrate the win that we've just had. So I encourage people to do that. Take a time out, take a day or two, whatever you need at the end of the quarter, get yourself so that you can actually celebrate, enjoy, and then move on and set your next goals.
Great input. Paul, my next book is Business Blunders and Bloody Great Ideas. I know that probably sounds like a shameless plug, and it is, sorry. What have been the biggest blunders that you've seen generally in business, and what would you have done instead?
Oh, my goodness. I've been involved in a number of organizations that have had leadership challenges. And in both the major situations, I'm not going to talk specifically, I was in a senior role with what I'll call either a board member or an international executive sitting over a country situation where decisions are made that did not get input from others before they made that decision. And that's probably been the single biggest blunder I've seen in both situations. And in both situations, the company literally collapsed because a decision was made to do something that they thought, oh, this is a good idea, but didn't get input from their senior leaders. And so I would, if you want to avoid making any major business blunders, just get counsel from people around you. Either have a group of advisors that are around you, or talk to your senior team. In fact, both. I would encourage both. That'll avoid some of those dramas. And if I could sit down with those two people that made the two biggest blunders that I've ever seen in my life and ask the question, why did you do that? I'm not sure they'll have a very good answer, to be honest with you.
Yep.
They thought it was the right decision at the time, but they didn't get counsel.
Yep. So a great idea, but in hindsight, something that wasn't thought through perhaps, but there we go. Paul, a lot of great business leaders have mentors or coaches as great sports people or elite sports people. Have you ever had a coach? And if so, what did they bring to the table?
So probably let me use a more recent example of what I've done to have other people give me input. I joined an organization here in the US called C12. And it's basically a CEO, business owner, peer accountability group, where you basically get a group of 12 people. There's a chairperson that sort of leads that group and essentially holds each of us accountable, but also allows you to have a board of advisors for your organization. So every year we would put our business plans together and we would pitch our business plans to each other and let everyone else pick it to pieces and say, well, what about this or what about that? even to the point where we would challenge certain people on things going on in their personal lives that was affecting their business. Because if things are not good at home, then it's not going to be good in the business as well. So I can definitely encourage people to have an exterior, either group or individual, that can speak into your life around certain things. In fact, very, very early on in my career, well before any of these industries that we've already talked about today, I did have a coach, and the single greatest question he ever taught me was this. And this is what you can, if you're listening to this and you want to ask a question to someone that is a coach, ask this one question. What is it that you can see I'm doing that if I changed, it would improve the way that I actually do business? And it then frees them up and allows them to be able to speak into your life and tell you what you need to hear. Because oftentimes you might be doing something wrong and no one really wants to tell you that. But if you say, look, here's an open book, tell me what I'm doing wrong, that if I changed, it would help my business, tell me about it, please. Best question I was ever able to ask. And I've taught people that I've led to ask that exact same question. Then it gives me the opportunity to speak into their lives.
Great thought, and that's a fab soundbite. Paul, you've been in the USA now for a number of years, although you haven't quite lost your Aussie accent. What's the difference in doing business there compared to other parts of the world that you've worked? I know you've been around a few.
You know, it's interesting you asked me that question, and I've run businesses in Australia, in New Zealand, and in the United States, and now I get to travel the world, and I've seen businesses in India and Europe and all sorts of places. And look, I think every country has a culture and the way that they go about doing business, and the US has a particular culture, and that is that they do celebrate success here. They don't have the tall poppy syndrome that was like Australia or New Zealand might have, where if someone sticks their head up too high, they want to bring them down a few pegs. Success is actually celebrated here. I would also argue, though, that when people are successful in the United States, sometimes they, let's just say they don't handle it well. I have seen people that have been incredibly successful and are the most humble people I've ever met. And that would be my epitome of true success, of someone that can actually be successful, be a normal person, treat others well without letting it go to their head and just it's all about them.
Excellent. Well, that's for anybody doing business in the US. That'll be some interesting soundbite there. Paul, what's the most exciting part of being part of, you got involved in the digital trade credit, using the digital trade credit tool. Some people call that barter. But what got you first involved in the industry?
Well, it's funny you should say that. So back in 2007, I was transitioning out of an organization from one of those ones where the founder had actually made that blunder and the whole thing collapsed. And I literally applied for a job with an organization in New Zealand and got the role as the CEO. And I knew nothing about it. The funny thing was, though, at exactly that same time, I was in the process of selling a house and I needed to buy a house. And the guy that was wanting to buy my house had a house for sale, and his house was worth less than mine. And I said, well, why don't we do this? Why don't you buy my house, give me some cash, and you give me your house? And so before I even knew about doing deals and trading and credits and all this sort of stuff, I'd actually done a deal, and it was $1 million deal to actually move out of one house into another house. But if you ask me the question, what was the best deal that I ever saw happen or that I was personally involved in, I would probably have to go back to a deal that we did in New Zealand. I met through a series of circumstances the chief operating officer for an organization called Fisher & Paykel. They're a large white goods manufacturer in New Zealand, and I think they've got product in other countries as well. And I remember taking him to a basketball game, and we built a bit of a relationship. And I said to him, have you got any excess inventory, that you need to get rid of? And he says, you know what? We're sitting on 500 Whirlpool fridges that we bought down from the US, and we cannot get rid of these things. And I said, well, why don't you let us help you move them? Why don't we move them turn them into a digital credit that you can then turn around and spend on marketing or something else that you want to spend money on. And he goes, that's a fantastic idea. We put these things out, and in 24 hours, we moved $500,000 worth of fridges.
Yep.
It was unbelievable. And it was probably the greatest deal that I've ever been involved in.
Yep. And it just shows the power of leverage and moving some stock and turning it into value, and everybody gets a win-win out of it, which is
that's right.
Which is the best part. And I guess, well, even Amazon at the moment, they've been criticised globally for their returns stock sitting there doing nothing and going into landfill of all places. So that would be a good example for people that have seen that particular story.
Absolutely.
Paul, you mentioned find a way to say yes. Is that like about saying something yes and then working out how to do it later, or something else?
It's basically before you say no, go and think about all the reasons why. Like, make sure you don't have to say no so that you can say yes. So it's not just about saying yes, I can do that, and figuring out how. It's about thinking about, look, I don't want to say no. So let me come back to you, and I want to go and look at all the reasons why I can say yes and figure out a way to do it. And then I'm going to come back and say yes to you. But if I have to say no, I will say no. But I don't want to say no. Like, a lot of people just say no very quickly. And so we choose in our organization not to say no, but say, hey, look, that's a good idea. Let me think about that and find a way that we can say yes.
Great positive outlook. Paul, you spent 6 years on the board of the International Reciprocal Trade Association, including a term as president. What thoughts would you share for anybody out there that whether or not they should participate in their industry body?
Look, I think if you want to see things changed, you need to be involved. But I would argue that the industry is, look, I'm not going to say it's small, but I want to say that everyone needs each other. So rather than acting as competitors and going, look, I don't want to talk to you, I think everyone needs to come together and say, look, here's the size of the pie. And rather than fighting over that one piece of pie, let's figure out how to make the pie bigger as a group. Because if we did that, then we would all actually grow and we will all actually benefit more. So I would highly encourage people to get involved in their industry body and participate, and not just participate, but get engaged.
Paul, you talk about this is the winter, the autumn, or whatever you like to call it, of your business career. What's next on the horizon in the next period of time that you can talk about?
Well, hey, look, this is really my last season of my business career. I've had a number of seasons, and I've done pretty much everything I wanted to do. I got to live and travel all over Australia and get paid to do it. Same in New Zealand. I've been living and traveling all over the United States and now all over the world. I've been a CEO for many, many years. I don't need to be a CEO anymore. I'm very happy not to be the CEO of this organization. I just want to make a difference. I want to give back and make a difference. And, we talked a little bit about faith, and that's what motivates me. It drives me. I mean, I don't know where people stand, but I certainly, when I get to my last days, and I don't know whether you believe in a creator God or not, but if you do and you stand before him, I want him to be able to say, hey, well done, good and faithful servant. So that's where I'm at. So
I talk about, people say, John, you're too old. Why are you still running around? And I say, well, I love what I do. Actually, Mondays are my favorite day. I love coming to the office, and I love doing deals, and I love being part of it. I don't need to do it, but it's what gets me going. And I see so many people around the world, they retire and they're dead within a year because their brain's gone to sleep. So
I don't plan on retiring. Both the CEO and myself of this organization, we're roughly the same age. And we've said, look, we may pull back from the senior executive positions, in our mid-60s, but we'll probably keep going for as long as we can, and helping the organization by, relationship development and building, connections with people and helping the organization grow globally.
Paul Bolte, it's been my absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. And there's a couple of little snippets in there that people will should take and do some implementation in there. So thank you very much for your contribution today. I know you're a busy guy, and it's been our absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Terrific. Really enjoyed it. Thanks so much, John. Great to see you.